Hi, this is George Sandman. I'm the founder and CEO of Growth Drive. Growth Drive is the #1 best-selling business advising platform, and this is our podcast, The Business Advisor Hot Seat. Now, in the hot seat, you're going to hear from industry leaders, thought leaders, your colleagues who are going to share tips, techniques, war stories about building a thriving advisory business based on delivering client wins. We're going to get into it. We'll get into it about the Growth Drive methodology, the Clarity software, what we see out in the world. So much more than just the system. And I'm also the author of The Growth Driving Advisor, which is based on over a decade of being an advisor to advisor, working with you and your colleagues, helping them build their practices, helping them through client engagements. And it's really proven strategies for leading businesses from stuck to best in class. Check it out. So strap in. We're going to light this up. Here we go. Our guest this week is Eric Owen, founder and president of Oak Hill Business Advisors. And Eric is what we call an exit doer. So he can work with a client to really discover their deep intentions, create a plan to get there, and help them execute that plan. Eric is a rare bird in the exit planning community. He's an exit doer, and we have a fantastic conversation. So here we go. This week's episode is brought to you by Growth Drive and the C3D certification. If you're looking to expand your reach and relevance with business owning clients, whether you're a business advisor or wealth advisor, this is a certification for you. And after completing it, you will understand how to make profits and transferable value M&A price actionable, how to maximize results for your clients. So get the details at growthdrive.com/C3D, scan the QR code, register. Listen, this is the path to building a thriving advisory business based on delivering client wins. This week's episode is brought to you by Be Ready Advisors. Enhance your business advisory services with specialized exit solutions. Listen, these guys will team up with you, increase your bench depth when you need specialized exit planning solutions for your clients. It's led by industry veterans Anna Halliburta, John Carter, and Kelly Malagilla-Carter, sponsors of the 2024 Growth Drive Summit. Be Ready Advisors. Check them out at bereadyadvisors.com. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This week in the hot seat, we have Eric Owen of Oak Hill Business Partners. Eric, it's great to have you. You know, you and I haven't known each other for very long, but I already feel like we're becoming good friends. I really appreciate it. And as we talk, you people out there, folks listening, are going to understand why. So, Eric, welcome. Thank you. And why don't you introduce yourself and tell the world why your clients hire you?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me, George. And you're right, we haven't known each other for very long, but I feel like you're a brother already. Like you and I really connected well when we first talked and have a very similar philosophy. I think people hire us at Oak Hill for two main reasons. One, everybody on our team has experience actually doing the job. And so unlike a lot of the people out in the business world who've only sat on the sidelines and played armchair quarterback and called the shots from the sidelines, we've actually been on the field and thrown the ball and caught the ball and run with the ball, right? And so it's a different feeling when you've done that than if you've only read about it or seen it from afar. And so we think that gives our clients a huge advantage because we've seen all these things and we've done them. And so they're not unusual to us. They're not surprises. But the other reason, quite frankly, George, and the thing that we believe sets us apart even more is that we tend to ask a lot of questions and really get down to the root cause of what's causing the problem. And this is a lost skill in consulting and, quite frankly, in the business world. We tend to, in our fast-paced world, we tend to want to get to the answer really quickly. And so we skip a lot of steps and we don't do the hard work to determine the real problem. And when we do that, we miss big things, right? We miss key elements that change, I assumed it was blue. No, it's actually red. And when you do that, you don't get to the right answer, right? And I think I could name off 20 reasons, but those two reasons tend to be the ones that stick out the most.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I thoroughly agree. It's actually, and for those of you folks out in the audience, Eric is faculty in the C certification in 3 dimensions of growth, where Eric is participating. We haven't recorded it yet, but we're about to. Using your skills as an exit doer. I want to use that differently than a planner. You're also you're a planner, but you're an
Yeah.
exit doer. And one of the things from our very first conversation, you and I are very passionate about setting clients up to deliver successful outcomes. And you can't deliver a successful outcome unless you ask a lot of questions,
Yeah.
because you
And
might be defining, you might be solving the wrong problem, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's funny, George. My dad was a doc, and one of the things he taught me, you put the smartest doctor in triage at the start because you want that person to be the one who looks at all the different variations and makes those really tough decisions. The actual surgery part often is easier than the diagnosis and the decision of who goes first, right? If you take a
Yes.
MASH type environment, which person do we need to, how do we sequence the people so we save the maximum number of lives and get everybody where they need to be, right? And those are tough decisions. You can't save everybody, right? And so how do you do that well? And he had been an Army doc, and he said, Eric, you gotta have smart people at the front end who decided, and it's exactly what you just said.
Well, and
And
it's interesting. Sorry, Eric.
no, and I was just going to add on. I appreciate your comment about a doer. One of the things I love about your and my discussions is we talk about the theory behind something. We talk about how it should work and how you do it and how you plan for it. But oftentimes the problem we see get lost in the weeds is now you gotta, the architect drew the plan. Now the builder has to go out and build it. And in the process of translating from the architect, from designing the plan, the plan and the essence of the plan often gets lost going over to the builder, and the builder says, hey, we can't do this because you designed a plan that doesn't really work in real life. And the architect says, hold on a second, really good builders could build this, why can't you guys do it, right? And you get this finger pointing stuff. And what I enjoy about being a doer, George, and I think you and I have talked about this before, is that when you actually have the ability to design and to build like a design build contractor, you take all that finger pointing out, but you also design things that actually work in real life. You design things that are going to solve the problems, and they're executable designs, right? And so it's a difference in the marketplace that a lot of people don't appreciate. You can have really smart designers that design beautiful, great things, but if you can't build it, what the heck, right?
That's
What
exactly right. That's exactly right. It's funny, Eric, because and here is the benefit of having someone like you helping a client, helping lead a client to where they want to go. It's because you understand what it's going to take to execute the plan. In the planning phase, you're actually able to create a better plan. And I'll just use a softball example. If we have a business that is not going to be able to successfully complete an M&A transaction, we need very early in the conversation, right before we even start planning, to draw a line through that for the business.
Yeah.
Be like, that is not a path we are going to.
Well, you're gonna waste a lot of time, right, George? You're gonna spend a lot of money and energy and time going down a path that's not gonna work, right? Like it's akin to taking the average guy or gal in high school and saying this person who's average height is going to be a great basketball star, and they're not really athletically inclined, and they're a good person, and it's not as if they have two left feet, but they're not a super athlete. Why do you think they're going to be the best person on your basketball team, right? So why not, instead of taking them and trying to make them into something they can't be, why not look at their strengths and weaknesses and say, you know what? This person is outstanding in the drama department, and they also have a really great voice. Maybe they should be the lead for our musical instead, right? And now we're working to the strengths. Now we're going down a planning area where we can really utilize the strengths of the situation instead of working against the weaknesses to try and make a square peg fit in a round hole.
Yes, heck yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and we're going to talk in terms. You devote a tremendous amount of time to a profession called, or a discipline called, exit planning. To point out to the world, every exit plan is a strategic plan. So when everything Eric and I are referring to applies to strategic planning, not every strategic plan is an exit plan, right?
And by the way, exit planning is the ultimate strategic plan, right? You can do strategic plans for 3 to 5 years. Most people try to do that. I would argue only reasonably well on average. But the ultimate strategic plan is, hey, I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to buy this business. What's my ultimate exit? That's a strategic, truly the meaning of the word strategic plan is to look out and say, what's the end game? And now work backwards and say, now what do I need to do in my short-term strategic planning to execute the things that are going to take me to that long-term plan?
And those of you who've been, you've never heard Eric and I talk before, but this is how our conversations go, right? Yes, the exit plan is the ultimate strategic plan because it aligns personal goals, the shareholders' goals, if you will, and professional goals, business performance, at the same point on the horizon. And something you just insinuated, and we say it all the time here at Growth Drive, is what are the clients going to need to do to get the success they want? And that goes right back to your first point, which was we better understand what the heck they want and understand at a very deep level.
Yeah.
Like asking why.
Yeah. I don't care what tool you use, but if you don't start at, our process is fairly simple at the 40,000 foot level. We want to know where you are, where you're trying to go, and what are the possible paths that can meet that? What are your goals and objectives? What are the restrictions on the possible plan? If we know those three things, then we can start to design a plan. So where are you? Generally speaking, clients that we meet are very good at giving us symptoms. They're generally not good at giving us root causes. So they'll tell us things like, hey, I've got a cash flow problem. Well, a cash flow problem is a symptom of a deeper problem. Why do you have a cash flow problem? Are your salespeople not executing on the right things? Are your operations people not executing on the right things? Right? Do you not have the right capital structure? What are the reasons that are driving that cash flow problem? You just gave me a symptom. I need to go down to the root causes. Secondly, where are you trying to go? Well, I want to make more money. First of all, that's not a strategy. Making more money is a great thing. We all want it, but it's an outcome of a direction. So where are you trying to go? Well, I'm 55 and in 10 years, I'd like to be sitting on the beach more. Okay. So you have a retirement plan. You and your spouse would like to live somewhere else 6 months of the year, or you'd like to be able to travel more, or you'd like to spend more time with your grandchildren. It doesn't matter what that input is, but you've got some plan that you're trying to get to, and it's different than what you're trying to do today. And so how do we get you from where you are today, what you just described, to where you want to be? Now, what are the constraints that you have? Well, I'm going to need money to do that. Yeah, you're going to need money. That's why a financial planner comes in and says, to live the lifestyle that you want 10 years from now, you're going to need this much money, and you're going to need it so it can generate this much income off of it so you can live off of that. Great. Okay, so now we know what the criteria are. Are there anything stopping us? Yeah, I don't want to sell my company to somebody who's going to rip it apart and just throw it in the trash heap. I want to sell it to somebody who's going to keep all my employees who I care a lot about employed for a long time. Or I want to take care of my employees, so I'd like to do something that would really, my 10 most loyal employees, millionaires, and everybody else would do really well. Oh, well, maybe we need to think about a management buyout, or maybe we need to talk about an ESOP. So the criteria that the client gives us starts to help us think about what are the pros and cons of the different options that we can do. And they're not singular options. The options it's like Legos. You can put blue Legos with red Legos. We can mix and match. We can make a composite solution that we could have a management buyout 50% and a 50% ESOP, or we could sell to a PE firm and support a management buyout, or we could, on and on and on, right?
Yeah,
And
it's interesting how they've become much more hybridized too. Yeah, it's
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, and to be honest, those are the more interesting from a technical standpoint, right? Like we like to play in those because they're fun, but more often you can solve the real problem better with a hybrid. The individual ones are restrictive because they often come with both pros and cons to each of the options. And if you can offset some of the cons of this option by pairing it with another option that offsets that and makes it a little bit better or work a little better for the situation, everybody wins in that, right? And that's where the creativity comes in, right? Anybody can design a square or rectangular, simple building that's all made out of brick and just looks plain. Anybody can do that. Like our sons, when they were 4 years old, could have designed that on a piece of paper with some crayons.
That's right.
The reason you're hiring an architect is because you want something that's designed really elegantly to solve the particular problem, right? And the more complex the problem is, the more elegant the design has to be to solve that problem elegantly.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. And because you're bringing a tremendous depth of expertise to the table, your clients benefit from that. So you're able to rifle through the card catalog and say, this is what I've seen, where someone who has not been involved in implementable designs may not be able to. Hey,
yeah, we had a prospect that we talked to at one point, George. I don't know if we've talked about this story before. We had a prospect, and they had a part of their business that they wanted to sell, and they were trying to sell it but that division had one customer, and that one customer was an outside service for the end customer, right? And so we talked to him and we said, look, of course we could maybe find a buyer for this. You're going to take an incredible haircut for it because it's a, high concentration, high risk kind of transaction. And we could do that, but the price is going to be low. And the rate of success, quite frankly, of finding that person, we're looking for a unicorn, right? And so we might not find the person who would take that risk and give us a reasonable price. That's a hard combination. We could also maybe ESOP that, and maybe that generates enough interest with your client that they look at that and that becomes a benefit to them, and they extend the contract or whatever, and everybody wins in that because the employees get taken care of, which was a high goal for this particular client. The client actually benefits because the employees are even more engaged because of an ESOP. Maybe that works, right? But the answer was there's still risk there. They could still get to the end of the contract, and the customer could say, enough, like we're not going forward. Yeah. And so we said, look, there's a third option, and they had never had anybody present the third option to them. And the third option in this case was, let's look at a joint venture. Let's sell half of it back to the customer. Now they're engaged in the actual running of this. They're not just a client. They're half owner in it. Now they've got a long-term relationship. You've just not only sold half and unlocked the value of that half, but you've also unlocked the value of the whole thing because now the customer's committed to it long-term. This is what we mean about elegant solutions. You're trying to not just mechanically solve the problem. You're trying to actually look at what are the components that are driving it, and what is the seller and the buyer, what motivates each of them, and what are we going to need to do to get the buyer and the seller to come to the point where where it's a win for both of them.
Yeah.
It's those kind of situations where you go, where when the client looks at you and goes, oh my God, why hasn't anybody else ever taught us that? Talk to us about that. Right? Like, then you've hit on something that you're actually giving true value for, not just repeating what everybody else has said.
Yeah, which goes full circle to starting with the end in mind and really understanding what the client's drivers are, and how they define success, right?
And in this case, we had to actually peel the onion on who's the customer and what do they really want out of this. Somebody listening might say, well, why didn't the client just take that resource back in? Well, the resource they were doing didn't really fit with who the client was. The service they were offering was a service that the client had outsourced on purpose, right? So they understood the value of having it separate from them, both to attract and retain the right talent and to get the right services delivered to them. And so there was a value in this thing being independent. By understanding that, we understood that joint venture might be better than, hey, let's just talk to the client about selling it back into them. Let's just sell it back 100% to them. It wouldn't have made sense to do that in this case.
Yeah, I love that. And this is what we go with successful outcomes, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a huge success for the client and importantly for their employees. Hey, let's shift gears a little bit.
Please.
So you are a thought leader in exit planning, and you have been called on to be on the main stage at one of the biggest or the biggest exit planning conference in the world. And start with a simple question. Why were you asked to be up on the main stage? And then we'll get into what.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes to 2 points. One, there aren't a lot of us, and I don't mean Eric's, not bald guys. I mean people who actually do the work of exit planning, right?
Agreed.
Who actually work on the business side and grow the value of the business and then take them through their options and help the business side of it exit, not the personal financial, like the financial planner. So in most of the exit planning people that I run into, a lot of the certified people are on the financial planning side, or they're accountants or they're attorneys, but they're not really and some of them are even consultants, but they're not really exit planners, value advisors. And so one of the reasons I was asked is because I'm one of the few, right? We're one of the few, Oak Hill Business Partners is. And we've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it for over 20 years and doing it with lots of flavors. And so we can talk from experience and expertise and doing that. I think another reason, though, is people don't want to hear just the book rhetoric. That's fine. It's good to talk about the theory behind something. People want to hear about actual stories of what's happened. And so you need to get somebody up there who's done enough of them that you can both communicate the story and you can answer questions, right? It's like, I don't just have one story. I could tell you, dozens and dozens of stories on different clients of what's happened and why this happened when you turned this knob, what happened over here, and why does that work that way? And so I think a big part of it is really just the ability to deliver stories and be comfortable enough to, in your own skin and in your experience, to be able to stand up in front of a group and not only articulate the story, but be prepared to answer questions about it and really let people take it wherever they go. I mean, I could I could stand up and just say, and I've done this before. Look, I brought my notes along, but I'm not going to talk about them. What do you want to ask me? Right? And just interact. And those are the most fun conversations, because then you start getting into what does the audience really want to hear.
Absolutely. You participated in our summit. Thank you very much. And
Which was awesome, by the way. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
But it's on for next year. Now, I believe in that firmly. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's share the experience. Let's make sure the questions that are in the room are answered, not the questions we want to answer, but the questions that are actually sitting in the room. And in our world, we describe, we say, are you a 1 or a 5? A 1 is let's use exit planning, right? As an exit talker. A 2 is an exit educator. And that represents a significant percentage of the credentialed exit planners out there, no matter whose credential you have.
The 1s and the 2s. Yep.
The 1s and the 2s. Then we have 3s, who are the architects. And that's actually, I would say that the people who are only architects is also very rare. So we have a lot of 1s and 2s. We have some 3s who are the architects. Then we have you, right? You're a 4. You're like, listen, I'm going to create the plan and I'm going to help you turn the plan into reality. And I'm not surprised that you, as a 3, a 4, bring a ton of value into the conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting, George. You need what I loved about the conference that you had, your summit, is there were people in the room who brought all kinds of different perspectives and all kinds of different skill sets to the table, from EOS kind of orientation to an HR kind of orientation to a marketing kind of orientation, right? Our firm is holistic. We think of ourselves like a design build general contractor. We can do the roofing, we can do the electrical, we can do the plumbing, we can do the framing, we can do the foundation. We might not do all of those ourselves, but we can build the whole building, right? And so we'll bring in the right people for the skill sets that we don't have. But you need all the different skill sets. And by the way, if you're building a specialized building, maybe an IT building, you might need a clean room, a manufacturing for IT, or if you're building a hosting site, you might need, some very complex heating and cooling rooms for hosting that. And those are really specialized people who need to do that part of the building. The rest of the building is easy for a general contractor, but that room might need some really specialized contractors, right? And so you need to be able to understand what you can do with your general skills and the things you do. And hopefully you have some areas where you go a little deeper. But you also need to understand when you're out of your element. And as a generalist, you're not going to do that really specialized thing. I don't want my internal medicine guy doing my heart surgery or my brain surgery, right? Like, he went to medical school just like the other guys or gals did, but I want the neuroscience or the cardiac surgeon, right? I want that person to be really good at what they do, and I want them to have done hundreds or thousands of them to do it, right?
And you just hit the nail on the head, and that's what our friend, mutual friend Mike Garrison calls subject matter experts, SMEs. And another guy with whom we both get along very well. I mean, had some very fun times down here in Charleston. But the SMEs come in and are plugged in, and this is what they've dedicated their profession to. Where you are to say a generalist isn't giving you fair. You are the general contractor, and that is incredibly hard. And
Yeah.
I would argue that you actually devalue yourself, and it's not the highest and best use of your time if you're applying special, subject matter expertise. You're kind of getting pulled down a rabbit hole, and we actually counsel people.
I can go pretty deep. Yeah, after 30 years of financial stuff, a CPA certificate, a CIPA certification, working for some of the biggest companies in the world, Johnson Controls, Rockwell Automation, 2 Fortune 500 companies. I could go pretty darn deep in the financial area, but you're right. I do less and less of that personally, because the architect part of my job requires that deep and broad knowledge. And that's the hardest part to do in a job, is really to design the solution. Doing the solution, you have to be pretty sharp you got to be good at your skill set, but you can be more narrow in that area. In the design part, you need to make sure you're factoring in all the different things that come at you and be able to pull it all together in that elegant solution, right?
Absolutely. And let's carry this thread forward. Often when we are executing a design, we'll break things, right? And we need to stop and have the wisdom to stop and reanalyze the situation and say, hey, things have changed. We broke something, the market has changed, a key employee left, what have you. And we need to analyze the situation again and then true up our plan to make sure that we keep moving forward.
For sure.
Any comments?
We also intentionally break things, George, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes a contractor comes in and builds a temporary wall to hold up the ceiling because we're going to knock down the load-bearing wall, right? And so sometimes we're intentionally taking out something that you're like, boy, you're taking down the main wall. Yeah, we are, because we need to rebuild it in a different way. And to do that, we got to build this extra wall that we're going to take back down again. It seems like a waste, but it isn't a waste, because if I don't hold up the ceiling, it's going to cave in. Right.
Absolutely. And purposeful design, I found, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. When we talk to clients, rather than planning, let's talk to them about redesigning their business so that it can serve their goals. We need to this is a well understood exercise. It's not easy, but it's well understood. And we're going to redesign your business. That's what private equity does every day, right? They show up, they fix what they've identified as broken, they redesign the business, and then they sell it upstream.
This is, and I was actually going to pivot a little on this 30 seconds ago, but this is exactly where I was going to go, George. This is what I appreciated in our first conversation, and I've appreciated getting deeper and deeper in your and my conversations. It's what I really appreciate about Growth Drive. It's a tool that helps us understand where are the things that are working well, the assessment. Here are the things that are working well. Here are the things that are working really well. Here are the things that aren't working so well. And what's holding us back is not the things that are working really well, obviously. The things that are holding us back are the things that are underperforming in that overall 24 segments that we look at, the three segments, each with 8 characteristics, right? And so as we start to look at those segments and start to understand where we're underperforming, if we can move the needle on those underperforming ones, we can bring the person up. Look, you're great at dribbling, and you're great at passing, but your shooting is not so good on the basketball court. If we could get you to shoot better, or boy, you're a great jump shot, but you can't shoot from the free throw line, and you're going to get fouled every time because they know you can't shoot from the free throw line. So let's work on that free throw, and let's make you that threat that they don't want to foul you because they know it's even more probable that you're going to shoot well from the free throw line, right? And so now you become a real threat on the court, right? And so that's what I appreciate about Growth Drive, and what makes it my job a lot easier as somebody who's out there trying to help clients solve problems is now we've got, to your point, a process and a methodology to show them objectively, here are the things that can help you get better.
This week's episode is brought to you by Be Ready Advisors. Enhance your business advisory services with specialized exit solutions. Listen, these guys will team up with you, increase your bench depth when you need specialized exit planning solutions for your clients. It's led by industry veterans Anna Haliburta, John Carter, and Kelly Malagilla Carter, sponsors of the 2024 Growth Drive Summit. Be Ready Advisors. Check them out at bereadyadvisors.com.
Here's what's holding you back. Now, if we can make improvements to this, and we can show you what that improvement, not only what it might be, because we can tear that part apart, that area apart a little bit, but we can also show you what that would be worth in value. If you improve this, your income would go up, and therefore and maybe your multiple would go up, and therefore the value of your company goes up. And now we've unlocked value because we've gotten you in a position where we can identify the things that we need to fix to get you to that value. So it's awesome.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot. I really appreciate it, Eric. And that's what we're trying to do. So I'm thrilled to have you pointed out.
Professionals can't do their job without good tools, right? I can be a great race car driver if I can't if my car never works, or it's always in the shop. It isn't as fast as everybody else's car, or as nimble, then I'm not going to win races. Right? And so we all need the right tools, George. And this is becoming a great partnership from my standpoint, because I already knew how to do the job. I just needed the right tools to do it with.
Well, thank you, man. And we're going to have some fun. We're already having fun. I know I see the bottles of wine behind you, and I'm going to leave that topic alone.
This is a dangerous room. There's bottles on all sides.
I had a Pinot Noir last night that I'm going to be reading about for a while. Anyhow, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. So you're a standout in the exit planning community, and it's an interesting. Let's talk about where that profession may be headed. And I don't have a crystal ball. But where do you think exit planning as a profession is headed? What do you think the next evolution is?
Yeah, this is a really fascinating question. Just a little bit of perspective on it, right? 40, 50 years ago, there was nothing like a financial planner. There were stockbrokers, right? That the generation or two before us went to a stockbroker who invested some investments that were over and above whatever pension they were going to get and Social Security. And that's how people retired. They retired on pension and Social Security. If you had extra money, you had a stockbroker who invested it for you. Now roll forward 40 or 50 years, we've invented the 401k, and everybody knows what a 401k is, or an IRA, and they've all invested in them, and we're planning our own because, one, there aren't pensions anymore for most employees. But secondly, over and above that, we all know that Social Security is not what it used to be, or what people thought it was going to be.
What we were promised it would be.
Yeah, right. So we realized that we had to pivot in our personal financial planning to saving money and being structured about that, and using time as our ally to build up that wealth over time with compounding interest and smart investing strategies. I think that we are like the investment financial advisory role was 40 or 50 years ago. I think we're at that same place in an exit planning today. We've had succession planning for a while, which is simply hire the next CEO or the next person for that role. Succession planning is about the person, it's the successor. Exit planning is the holistic model, the financial advisor or wealth advisor that really holistically looks at everything and says, yeah, you got a 401k, you also have your house, you also have your personal investments, you also might be carrying old 401ks from other businesses that you were at earlier in your career, and you might have some gold or some other non-standard investments over here. And as a wealth advisor or financial advisor, you're trying to get your arms around all of that and really balance risk and figure it out. And if you have a business owner as a client, that business owner has over 80% of their wealth in their business. It's not in the investments or the house or all the things that you see as regular traditional investments. Most of their investment and their risk is over here. And they're doing that for a reason, because they believe in themselves, they're betting on themselves, and they're getting a great return on it, generally speaking. But to help a business owner is a whole nother level of stuff, because there's obviously a concentration risk in their investment portfolio, but generally speaking, it's one of the best returns they get overall as a business owner, because they can grow that business, and through a relatively small investment, they can make a large amount of money. But now we got to turn that person who has been looking at their business and running a business, and that's all they've been focused on 60 plus hours a week for the last 30 years. And this is their baby, and it's all they think and think about all the time. Now we got to turn that person off and say, you're going to step out, and now you just got to switch that switch off and go sit on a beach somewhere and read the paper.
And we have to deliver the news that you need your business to be immortal. So let's say that you want to sell it to a third party. We need to communicate to them that we're going to pluck you out, and the business is going to be even better. And getting a business owner to understand the concept of an immortal business that will be better without them, it's a huge step, because for 30 plus years, they've been thinking the most important thing is for them to be involved in everything. And really, the business is far more valuable. It's an inverse relationship. It is an inverse relationship. The less they're involved, the more valuable the business is for transfer purposes, right? Yep. So here's my answer to your initial question. All that being set up, what I think is going to happen over the next 20, 30, 40 years is exit planning is going to be part of the short and long-term strategic planning of businesses. And what we're going to do is build businesses that are ready to exit all the time. Businesses that have a good base and are cash flow positive and know how to run, are scalable, right? And you'll recognize these buckets, and are transferable. And so if we can build those three components in, and I love how you do that, George, how you lay that out. I've been talking about those three for a while, but you really lay them out in a concise and organized way. If we can build businesses that run well, that are scalable,
and are transferable. And they're that way all the time. And they start out that way. We get them within a year or two of their startup, and they bootstrap for whatever that is, 2 to 5 years. And then they conform into these well-run businesses that have these three components to them. Now, exit planning becomes more like a guide and helping them stay in the lane and helping them decide on, do I want to go this way a little more or this way a little more, instead of what we have now, which is, oh, you haven't done any maintenance on your house for 40 years. You lived in it, you enjoyed your house, and now you want to sell your house. Guess what? You better pick up the phone and call your construction company and be ready to fork out $50,000 to $100,000 so you can get your house back in shape so you can sell it for good market value, right?
And what's funny, and the analogies are very good, because your house will never look better than the day you're pulling the door closed,
right,
and turning over the keys. Your business will never look better than when you've gotten a significant wire and they don't need you anymore.
And the problem is, there are a couple problems. One, you didn't get to enjoy all that. My wife, when we moved 4 years ago, we had just gotten done painting the house and getting things ready, and we realized we needed another bedroom. And she's like, should we add on to the house or should we move? And we wrestled with both of those things. And I like both of the ideas. But we eventually bought another house. And one of the things she said to me is, Eric, we just got done doing all those things and we got in the house exactly how we wanted it and we moved out. And that's a horrible feeling. We could have enjoyed it that way for 10 or 15 years if we had some forethought and some planning to do some of those simple things. These weren't big things. We just painted some rooms and we fixed up our basement a little bit. Like, we did relatively, the redo of the basement, which was unfinished and became finished, was a bigger piece, but we could have done that in phases, right? And so we would have been able to enjoy some of that stuff for a longer time. But the second problem is there's a huge underlying assumption in this whole thing that I can live in my house for 30 or 40 years and nothing bad is going to happen. I'm not going to get divorced. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be disabled. No bad thing is going to happen to me. And I'm going to be perfectly healthy in 40 years and ready and able to invest my $50,000 to $100,000. These are a lot of assumptions we're building up here that I'm going to be able to do all that and then get the maximum value out of my house.
But what could possibly go wrong?
If any one of those assumptions falls apart, or all of them fall apart, or a good number of them, then this number goes from here, down, right?
Yes. And then you just hit on the incredible confluence, the synergy between you as an exit doer, you as a profit and value growth driver, pardon the term, and a wealth advisor who doesn't want to do, frankly, and is prohibited from doing a lot of what you do, but they bring something important to the table. And this is what caused us to create the new continuity risk analysis. Is your wealth advisor brings some very sophisticated advanced planning, the ability to develop and deploy sophisticated compensation that a lot of our clients have never heard of, right? And insurance, so that some of the things that you've just described, maybe with some very cost-effective insurance, those are good investments. We might put a line through those, through several risks, because you're right, getting hit by a bus, having a heart attack, falling off your mountain bike and breaking your neck, those happen a lot. 50% of exits are unplanned. And it's funny.
This is the biggest fact. The one you just said is the biggest fact that nobody's taking into account. Like 50 years ago, we just thought, okay, we'll get to retirement and we'll be able to get that already, right? And now we say, yeah, you can't do that. You got to invest in your 401k for every paycheck so that you're always building something and you've got something, right? And when we get there, we'll have something, right? Yes. Whatever there is, right? Yes. The problem is, on the business side, we're not doing the same thing. We get our head down in the business side. We put our head down, we got our blinders on, and we're just kicking along going, of course my business is getting worth more because I have a higher revenue number and I'm working hard at it. So it must be worth more because my revenue went up and I'm working harder. Neither of which are good are good indicators of value in a business.
I'm like figuratively chewing on my fist. I thoroughly
Yeah.
agree, right?
Yeah.
Hey, who wouldn't want to be me? I have
Yeah.
a fast car. I've had a big truck, a beautiful house. We take fabulous vacations. My kids are in the best schools. I go to work. And frankly, I'm not working as hard as I could be. Who wouldn't want to buy this business? Well, frankly, no one would, because without you, the business doesn't function.
And you or I have to come in and tell them, I'm sorry, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, your business that you thought was worth $20 million is really worth 7.
And that is the tool that we endeavored to build, and I believe we have built, which is a way to say, without preaching to our client or wagging our finger, have them tell us, hear themselves tell you, I'm not the best in, we have 24, we'll start at the high level, 24. I'm not the best in 4, 18, all 24. I'm not top of the charts in any of those. So then when we say, well, your business, I know you think your business is worth 30 million, but you can only monetize 18 of it. They're not shocked, right? Because they've just heard themselves say, we don't really, and
I didn't put the effort into that thing. I haven't really worked on that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're at 40. This is a great conversation. I didn't realize that we were at 45 minutes. Maybe we can use this in closing. I talk about equity value planning, and that seems to sort of be part of your stream of, the stream of conversation. Rather than exit planning, let's plan on the equity value of your business, because those businesses are resilient, right? Those businesses are able to withstand the shocks of a down economy, the shocks of a key employee leaving, the shock of perhaps the founder, the owner, the CEO having to step aside for a significant amount of time. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would love to comment on that. So I think there are 2 pieces to the question you asked. Mm-hmm. One is, I listed off some things like death, divorce, disability before, right? What we in the industry call the 5 Ds, right? That we could go through, right? And those are all things to think about. But another component of that is we're often not self-aware enough to see where the other stakeholders are looking at risk. So let me, if you can indulge me for just a minute or two, George, one of the concerns that I try to express to people is, how are people seeing you? George, you're 75 years old and you're still running this company. Do you think maybe your employees or your customers are starting to ask the question, what happens if George isn't here anymore? Do you think? And do you think that maybe they're starting to weigh their risk and reward portfolio and say, does this make sense for me to stay in this risk position? You may actually, George, have a brilliant plan to address all that. But if you haven't communicated it clearly and they don't understand it, now they're looking at it saying, George just keeps getting older every year. I don't see anything changing as an employee. Maybe I want to go somewhere else, because if George falls over dead tomorrow, I'm screwed, right? And so we don't think about those other stakeholders. Now, George, I'll just throw one stakeholder out that we almost never talk about: spouse.
Yes.
What's that spouse thinking? I've heard conversations in my career where the spouse comes in the room and says, hey, you said that we were going to do this for 5 more years. You were going to do this for 5 more years. And then we were going to travel here and we were going to buy that house in Florida and we were going to spend 50% of our time there. It's been 7 years and we don't even have a house picked out yet. And I'm starting to get tired of hearing it's going to be 5 more years. I want the house in Florida that you promised me that we were going to hang out at. Right. And right. I mean, like, there's so that's the half of it. We're not thinking about the what other people are seeing that we're not paying attention to. Because quite frankly, I still think of myself like that 25-year-old guy or 30-year-old guy who, can play tennis anytime he wants or run a marathon if I feel like it tomorrow. And I'm not. Right. And we all think that way. Right.
Yeah, one day I woke up and I'm knocking on the door of 60. I'm like, what in the heck
what happened?
Your point is a really
years
good
ago?
one. And that's kind of every business is a family business.
Yeah.
And to wrap our conversation back to the beginning, when someone skilled like you with experience as you have sits down and starts the conversation with the client before we bring out any tools, measuring tapes or anything. And that conversation is, listen, we're going to dig in. What does this business must get deliver for you and your stakeholders? And let's carefully define those stakeholders. And there's so much there, but the spouse should be frankly in the room. But
So the other half of your conversation real quickly is that equity side. You're right. Look, we talked about before, if you produce that cash flow business that's solid and can work, first of all, that's a more resilient business than 90% of businesses out there, that alone. Now we produce ones that's scalable and we start scaling it, but it's got that base and it's scalable. Now you're in the 95th, 97th percentile, right? And now you add to that a transferable business that has all the characteristics. It has financials that make sense, that somebody would come in and go, yeah, that'll pass due diligence. It has all those characteristics that it's actually somebody would buy it. Now, again, now you've got something that can weather the storm. It can weather the storm because it's going to outperform all the ones that aren't set up with cash, don't have healthy financial statements that can weather a little bit. They're living paycheck to paycheck or they're living, whatever. And so all those aspects that we're doing in a business are good for the long term as well as the end state. And if you're doing that all along, then when the bumps come in the road, when the COVID strikes or when the Great Recession strikes or a smaller bump in the road, now those smaller bumps in the road, not only can you weather them and other people can't, but often what happens is these smart businesses are prepared to take advantage of the opportunity. Everybody else is selling because they got to sell off their assets so they can keep their head above water, right? They're throwing stuff out of the plane so it keeps flying, right? And I almost envision you flying in the plane below them, George, and you're catching all that stuff going, good. We have plenty of room in our plane. Like, I'm going to catch that and I'm going to use that and I get to keep that now, right? And you get things for pennies on the dollar when everybody else is selling to keep their head above water. And now you come out on the other side. You don't come out at the same place you were. You come out three links ahead of the other person, not only because you did better in it, but because you got to take advantage of the fact that other people had, problems and had to sell, and you got to buy things, pennies on the dollar, or acquire things,
or acquire entire
business, and you got their customers, right?
Exactly right. And we need to get together and keep this conversation going, because I desperately want to discuss the fact that exiting your business does not necessitate leaving, right?
Yeah. I think that's part two, George.
Exit the accountabilities, and you can go, and I'll tease it, and you can go from being the president, the operator, to being the CEO. The CEO maximizes shareholder value, to being the chairman, and you can still get your compensation, et cetera. I mean, we should do a round two. We should do a round two.
I call it the other option that nobody talks about. There are a bunch of exit options, and then we forget to talk about the option, which is don't exit, but you get to step back and hire somebody else to run the business. There's a lot of meat in that conversation.
There is, especially for our generation, where I don't think you and I are ever going to retire in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
I'm never going to live on a golf course in Florida. Everything right with that. I love working. But I want to work.
Maybe I don't want to work 60 or 70 hours a week anymore. Maybe I want to work 30 hours a week, or for sure.
Amen. Eric, George, man, as always, what a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You and I always have fun just talking, but what I love about our relationship is we don't just talk, we get stuff done. So
that's right. That's exactly right. Well, we'll do a round two. All right, Eric, I really appreciate it. Thank you, man.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi, this is George. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe, like, and please take 2 seconds to leave a review. It tells the world that you like what we're doing, and it helps us understand how we can improve the show. Thank you, and see you next time.